All right, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of the Relentless Potential podcast. Today, we're going to get into some of the foundational beliefs of relentless potential. The number one, or the number the two, the two main aspects are sustainability with progress, continual progress. And why sustainability is often related to agriculture, and today I'm going to talk about it. Sustainability is about life when you really think about it. And when we're talking about sustainable energy, sustainable crops, sustainable food sources, sustainable materials, what are we talking about? Something that we're managing in a way that it does not fully deplete, that it's able to continue to reproduce itself. Right? So that's what we want, sustainable potential. In this podcast, it's my goal to create a structure of understanding and give advice and discuss the varying aspects that go into living a sustainably progressive lifestyle. I don't want you to have one goal, accomplish it, and be burnt out. And that happens to so many of us. Or we get burnout in the process and we never even complete our goal. But even worse, we don't really want to complete that goal. We start deciding maybe that's not for us, or maybe it's where even if you know where you were isn't where you want to be, maybe it's still more enjoyable than trying to change something. Right? And that happens way too often, and I've seen it way too often. And it's the way we go about it. Going back to ag and agriculture or the earth, you think about the earth, it goes through cycles, right? But by and large, far outliving ourselves. If the earth's left to its own devices, will self-regulate, right? It will continue to manage, evolve, adapt, and it's an immense ecosystem of interconnected parts. Without outside intervention, terraforming, anything like that, the Earth will do what it needs to on its own. Will it have cycles? Yeah, but it never stops doing is it never stops growing, it never stops changing, it never stops evolving. But more importantly, it's sustainable. And if something isn't sustainable, it's eliminated or changed or evolved. But when we look at modern agriculture, that's not always the case, right? You you end up with soil depletion, right? Or as we grow and we try to fuel ourselves, energy depletion or energy concerns, right? And then what do we have to do? We have to pivot, right? So a lot of crops will rotate crops for a different reason because different crops require different nutrients. The nice thing about us as humans is that we are single organisms, right? You are an individual. I am an individual. I need to sustain me. You need to sustain you. And what that gives us is the ability to adapt to, we need to find a way to adapt to being a single crop, if that makes sense. We we need to figure out how we can continually exist and continually recover potential. Because that's what it's really talking about, sustainability. It's perpetual. How can we I have like the idea of a solar powered car, right? You can have a solar powered car that runs during the day, but then needs something else at night, right? If you wanted to drive it through the night, you'd need some kind of crazy like a battery pack or something like that, right? Or a generator, something that will allow it to recharge during the day and still be fueled for what it needs to do in the evening, like after the sun goes down or on a really cloudy day. That's obviously in an ideal world. Right now, we still plug them in, right? All of our electric cars, we plug them in. But humans are more advanced than that. We have the access, or we have access to lots of different energy sources. Simplest one, food, right? What we eat, the type of foods we consume. You look at that daily value table and how you're supposed to, daily recommended guidelines for eating. They're there because our bodies need a lot of different things, right? Just because we're a single organism doesn't mean that the environment that we need to cultivate in order to grow perpetually. Um, what is it? I'm not that great with plants. Perennially, annually. But either way, to continually to grow, it's going to vary. Food, only one aspect of it. Another aspect, how we cultivate that energy, how we use that energy, energy efficiency. Right? That brings into question, what are we doing that takes the energy away from us? Right? And that can be thoughts, that can be ineffective actions, unhelpful things that we do as habits or as reactions that deplete energy. And then how many actions are we taking without restoring energy? Right? There needs to be a certain level of energy balance. Even in modern technology, right? So a totally different understanding of an 80/20 rule is cell phone batteries, right? So my cell phone, you got it. I like to go hike, I like to go backpacking, so I always worry about battery life because if I don't have to bring an external power pack, although I do a lot of times just for safety because, stuff happens, um, I don't want to. I also don't like to charge my phone a whole lot. So when I was looking into the research for battery life, it's actually you want to maintain in between the 80 and the 20, right? To maintain ultimate battery life longevity. So that longevity of your battery life. Not how long you can use it for one charge, which is what we tend to focus on in our life. How far can we push at once before we need to rest, right? But if I were to charge my phone to 80% and not let it go below 20%, do I need to charge it a little more often? Yes. But long term, no. Long term, when everyone else who charged their phone to 100% and got that extra 20% or let it drop all the way down, right? Now they're going to find out in a year or two, however long it is, they actually have to charge their phone a lot more. My 80 to 20 will actually start to outlast their 100 to 0 in the long term. And the reason for that is because I made sure that I maintained a certain energy balance, that I wasn't consistently depleting myself completely, and I wasn't overamping myself all the time either. Now, are there times to go 100%? Yeah, obviously, right? And to be honest, doing that is fun, right? Going all out sometimes feels amazing, but that's the other side. When you're going all out and it feels amazing, guess what you're doing? You're also repairing while you're releasing. While you're releasing your potential, while you're turning into all that kinetic energy, you're actually recharging. Physically, you may be working hard. Mentally, you may be working hard, but emotionally, you're restoring. So at the end, while one aspect may be depleted, you're not depleted, right? Your enthusiasm didn't deplete. That enthusiasm is going to help you rebuild quicker, help open you up to a willingness to push again sooner. That's a big aspect of sustainability and progress that we don't talk about. Know that 80/20. Know what range, and then are you recouping in process? There are ways to recoup in process. If you have a long day and you push, do you forget to eat? Right? Maybe you do. Maybe you totally forget to eat that day. And at the end of the day, you feel like garbage. But more importantly, the next day you wake up, you're not very refreshed. You still feel like garbage. Whereas what happened if you did fuel effectively throughout that day? Right? You may consider it, well, now I'm slowing down. I'm not making as much progress. Oh, yeah, is that true? And more importantly, is that sustainable? For one, at what point did you get brain fog? At what point did you get exhausted and you're simply grinding through, but the quality may be going down? If not, congratulations. If you don't believe that happened, okay, I can't say that you're wrong. Science would argue, but maybe you're one of those unique. Maybe that's a way that you're unique. We're all unique in many ways. Maybe that's one way that you are. But what I think you'll find is when it comes to sustainable, it's not about those one-term pushes. It's about what you do during those long sessions. Okay? The runners who find a better way to fuel in long distance races, long distance runs, endurance sports, it's a key. They learn to fuel. But we don't like to do that in our daily lives. We feel like it's a waste of time. But it's not because you're able to continue to progress longer, further, far, and ultimately faster. I'm not talking about tortoise in the hare. I'm not talking about going super slow to make progress. It may be, I'm talking about long term, your ability to produce and enjoy and experience fulfillment and your goal accomplishment will be directly correlated to your energy balance, how well you're able to recoup during and after the habits that you develop in conjunction with the one habit that we tend to focus on, which is how do we accomplish our goal, right? How do you accomplish your goal has specific criterias. If I want to write a book, how do you write a book? Well, you start putting words on paper, you start creating an outline, right? Now, what happens if you only do that? You forget to eat, you forget to drink, you forget to walk outside, So for one, what happen you're in an isolated environment. What happens if you get a mental block? You're like, what do I write on this page? But you don't go anywhere. You don't move. You get no additional stimulus. What happens with your progress? Right? You can barely keep your eyes open. Where's your creativity? Where's your enthusiasm? Where's your joy? Right? So throughout the rest of this podcast, as we continue, I know these are kind of like introductories, first one, second one, but as we continue, these are some of the key aspects that I'm going to be focusing on in different ways, discussing how we can grow compassionately without without surrendering some of those more aggressive moves that we make, some of those bigger pushes, but doing them in a way that burnout doesn't really show up. Not that fatigue doesn't show up, but fatigue and burnout are very different things. If you exert yourself hard, you might be tired. Burnout is when you don't want to do it anymore, at least by the way I define it, when you get to a point where you're like, it's no longer sustainable, I can't do it, or I simply don't want to. There's nothing worse than accomplishing one goal and never and actively feeling like you want to avoid doing another one. Right. In this podcast, we're going to talk about growth in a lot of different aspects, but they're all going to be focused on this premise. They're all going to be designed and discussed in a way that's supportive to your long-term growth and sense of fulfillment. So you don't have to quit at the end. You don't have to rest like crazy at the end. You're doing things in a sustainable way for continued progress where you're still enjoying the experience. You're still excited for growth. You don't, and then in addition to that, we're also going to be reshaping, and I'll talk about that probably in the next episode. But we'll talk about how to reshape and redefine progress as well to enable you to create more of that sustainable growth with less judgment, because we're going to reshape some of the expectations and understandings. And thank you very much for watching this episode or listening to this episode. And I look forward to talking to you more in the next one.